Aloha! Welcome to this week's video. So this week I'm actually going to be doing something a little bit different. I was working on my personal piece here, this slashing style pahoa or dagger, and I messed up on part of the pearl inlay on one of these sides. You can see that second triangle pearl inlay, the corner. I sanded it off. I didn't inset it deep enough, and so when I was sanding everything down, I sanded off that section. And that just completely irritated me. So out of frustration, I just kind of stopped working on this piece. I'll definitely be going back to it here in a little bit. I'm not sure when, but oh man, it's just so irritating. So instead of working on this piece, I'm actually going to be working on this piece. So this is also a pahoa. This is a marlin bill tipped thrusting pahoa, and so it's a dagger you'd use for like a spike or like similar to like a stiletto, but the joint between the marlin bill and the handle broke. I don't know how this broke or when it broke, possibly during shipping, not entirely sure. I just received a photo and a video from the client, and so I had him send it back to me, and I'm going to go ahead and be repairing this. So the first step is just to break it apart and see what happened inside. I kind of thought that one of those legs on that tongue and groove joint had broken, but that wasn't the case. And so the only other option there would be that the tongue side, the marlin bill side, had possibly broken out. But I also noticed that my lashing was a little bit too far forward, and so it didn't actually wrap the joint. Which is part of the issue. The lashing should be right over top of that joint, so it adds additional stability. And I'd lashed it too far forward, so that was definitely an issue there. I normally also put in a cross peg. Sometimes I don't. It kind of depends on the piece. I probably didn't on this one just because it was a shallow joint, but because it didn't held up, I'm going to go ahead and just make sure I put a cross peg in on this next one. So the first step is just to remove the feathers. I can't really reuse them after that, and so I'm just throwing them away. And then inspecting the marlin bill, I can see that it definitely did kind of broke out just a little bit. So I need to clean up the marlin bill just a little bit. I am gonna be cutting back on that, so it's gonna make it a little bit thinner, but that's okay, because when I go to put some wood back on a wood handle back on it, I can match it to that piece. But because I'm changing, or because I will be changing the marlin bill just a little bit so that I get a cleaner joint on there, I'm going to be making a new handle entirely. I thought about cutting back on this handle here, but it kind of would make it a little bit too short, and so I wasn't really a big fan of that, so I'm going to make a new one. Since I'm making a new one, I thought I'd make it just a little bit longer. That way the overall length of the piece is still roughly the same size. So the first step here is just going to be marking in where this joint is going to be going into. I want it to be a really tight joint. I don't want it to be loose, just so that I have a nice, strong, solid hold between the coil wood handle and the marlin bill. And then before I go to shaping it though, I'm going to cut off some of this excess material on the handle. Now this is a darker koa. The other koa was a really light koa. It was an edgewood, so it's the wood that's right between the bark and as you go deeper into the grains of wood. That's why it was so light, and I really liked that light edgewood, but it was too small of a piece, and so I needed to make a new handle. This piece here is actually really pretty. It's hard to tell, but I couldn't wait to start shaping on it and sanding it down, just because it looked absolutely gorgeous. The first step though, obviously, is I'm going to be gluing in this joint. I let that sit for 24 hours. And then I'm going to go ahead and put in the cross peg. I put my cell phone up on the shelf. I didn't realize it was partially obstructing the view, so I apologize for that. It's kind of distracting, but got nothing to do about that. So I'm putting in a 3/8 inch peg here. So it's a little bit wider of a peg. I just want to have a nice thick peg there. And then that's just a cross peg, so that gives it structural stability so I can't pull out and it also makes it so it can't really slide side to side. And now I'm going to be shaping. The nice thing with these pahoas, the shape of the handle is really simple. It's more of a cylindrical shape, so I don't really have to spend too much time on it. The rest of it is just sanding. And then I'm going to be sanding this piece down to 320 grit. So it's 300. For those of you that aren't familiar with sandpaper, the higher the number, the finer the grit. So I started with 120 and then went to 150, then 220, and then 320. And now that I have it sanded down to 320, I can go ahead and oil it up. So the oil that I like to use is tung oil. It adds very little color to the piece. It just does a really good job at bringing out the natural grain of the wood. And I love the way that koa wood looks. So tung oil is definitely one of my favorite finishing oils to use. And so I'll let this sit overnight just so it gives it time to set and to cure. And then the next step will be to lash on the feathers and lash over that center joint there. But man, that looked beautiful. One thing that I do when I go to lash on these bills is I put a notch or a groove into the marlin bill. The purpose of that is because the marlin bill tapers. As you go to lash, the cordage will slide down the bill, and that notch will lock it into place and keep it from getting stuck. The feathers here, these are just some rooster feathers. They do have like a little bit of cloth. I like getting this just because it makes it a little bit easier to keep them together. If I don't use this, I have to find some other way of holding them together. You can lash them together, you can tape them together, but having those that already have that lashing or cloth there is really handy. So for the lash here, it's just a basic twist on here, and then I put a loop on one end, and so I knot it. After I finished lashing it, I slide that knot through that loop, and then I pull it tight, and that locks everything into place. And so that's what I'm doing here. And it's a pretty fast process for this. If it was a larger piece, it would take a lot longer, but just because of its size, it goes by pretty quick. And then this piece didn't have any teeth on the marlin bill, so it was quite a bit easier to work with. If there was teeth on there, I'd have to watch out for those teeth the entire time, so that was that's kind of nice. And so here is the finished piece, and man, did that look actually beautiful. I love the dark koa. I really liked the light koa too. I like it all. It's all pretty awesome. But it turned out absolutely beautiful. I'm very excited to bring this piece back to life, and I'll be shipping it back out to the client. I'm hoping they enjoy it as much as they did the previous piece. Here's a little bit of the piece in the natural light, and you can see the curl and color on that handle. The feathers have a nice accent to the color gradient. Just an absolutely gorgeous piece. Well, I hope you enjoyed this week's video. This piece was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed fixing that piece and getting it back into action. If you liked the video, leave me a like and a comment below. Subscribe if you haven't. Mahalo plenty for everyone that watches, and I will see you next time. Aloha.